Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask for unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and to submit extraneous material into the record.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm honored to be here today with my friend, Assistant Democratic Leader Joe Neguse, to talk about my law, the Honoring Our PACT Act. It was signed into law by President Joe Biden in August 2022 and has since helped more than 1 million veterans and their survivors receive health care and benefits they have earned. In the 116th Congress, we passed the Blue Water Navy Act that helped Blue Water Navy veterans receive care and benefits for exposure to Agent Orange during the Vietnam War. These veterans had waited decades for this relief, and I'm so glad that we could help them cut red tape and make it easier for them to receive health care for certain conditions. But it took way too long to get it done. After Blue Water Navy, we were hearing from veterans around the country about being exposed to burn pits and other toxins when they were serving our country more recently. And then they were experiencing serious illnesses that they thought were connected to their toxic exposure. So many of these service members were directed to throw trash, plastic, and other items into burn pits, and this meant breathing in the toxic air. Or they were exposed to jet fuel for long periods of time due to their job in the service. It is easy to look back and think that this was not a good idea, but they did not have a choice at that time and were following orders. It was taking the Department of Veterans Affairs too long to address these veterans' illnesses on its own due to the perceived cost and the difficulty in obtaining the scientific evidence needed in order to help. So we knew there was a strong need, and with the lessons learned from Blue Water, we knew we need to act. This was the origin of the Honoring Our PACT Act. When we send our service members into harm's way, we make a pact to care for them when they come home. This is one of the most sacred promises in our country and the ultimate goal of this law. Thanks to the PACT Act, veterans no longer need to prove the connection between their service and an illness. The law outlines 23 categories of presumptive respiratory illnesses and cancers, representing over 300 individual conditions for which veterans can quickly get health care and benefits. And since the law was signed, several more presumptive conditions have been added to the list, with more on the way. Congress is able to work together on a bipartisan basis to get this done for veterans. Unfortunately, not much has gotten done for veterans since then, which truly troubles me. Helping those who have served should be a nonpartisan issue and one that gets due attention, no matter which party is in charge. When President Biden, well, thank you. I'll continue momentarily, but at this time, I'd like to yield to my friend from Colorado, our Assistant Democratic Leader, Representative Joe Neguse.
Well, first, let me say, Mr. Speaker, that we are so grateful to the ranking member for his steadfast leadership, leading the Veterans Affairs Committee, and of course, his leadership with respect to the PACT Act. I couldn't be more grateful to the colleagues that I have the privilege of serving with in the House Democratic Caucus, whom the country will hear from tonight, many of whom are veterans. People like Representative DeLuzio, Representative Carbajal, individuals who have given a great deal to our country, made countless sacrifices, and now are leading the charge here in Congress to protect our veterans. I couldn't be more grateful to people like Dr. Raul Ruiz, whose leadership year after year making the case for the Congress to treat this particular issue with the urgency that it deserves, ultimately culminated in the PACT Act. The PACT Act, as you heard from our ranking member, marked the largest expansion of benefits in a generation, cutting red tape, waiting times for veterans who were exposed to toxins and developed certain illnesses. It was historic in that it provided benefits to generations of veterans, many of whom were long forgotten. 1 million PACT Act claims, Mr. Speaker, 1 million. And we are just getting started. For the families who have suffered the ultimate loss, the PACT Act means access to life insurance, to tuition benefits for their surviving family members, for home loan assistance, for monthly stipends, and more. Mr. Speaker, you will hear from Mr. Jim Costa and Mr. Tim Kennedy and so many other members of our caucus the same admonition, which is that we have to do everything in our power to provide for the families of fallen service members. We have made progress in that regard, but there is much more for us to do. And House Democrats stand ready, as we always are and will be, to get that job done. So I thank the ranking member, again, for his leadership. I thank the members of the House Democratic Caucus for their leadership, and I look forward to making more progress in the days, months, and years ahead. And I yield back to the ranking member.
Thank you, Representative Neguse. I will now yield to my friend from Pennsylvania, a veteran and up until recently an esteemed member of the House Veterans Affairs Committee, Representative Chris DeLuzio.
I thank the ranking member for yielding, Mr. Speaker. I think we all in this body agree this country has a sacred obligation to care for those who wore the uniform, who served in peace or in war or both. And that starts with adequately funding and staffing the VA, to making sure that those who have earned their benefits, who have earned their care, can receive them. And that's why the Honoring Our PACT Act that the ranking member and so many others got through this Congress is such a big deal. It's why it's so powerful. It expands VA health care and benefits for toxic exposed veterans across generations who have served, fulfills that sacred promise this country has. Veterans have long been exposed to some nasty stuff in service. Vietnam, the Gulf War, Afghanistan, Iraq, other places. My generation saw burn pit exposure in places like Iraq and Afghanistan. We now know how dangerous this exposure can be and is for folks. Cancers, diseases. The PACT Act meets this moment. It adds presumption for service-related illnesses coming from that toxic exposure. It cuts through red tape that had been blocking too many veterans from the care they've earned. We see the numbers. Over 1 million veterans and survivors have already had claims approved under the PACT Act. That's a big deal. It means those veterans or their families now have access to those benefits that are hard-earned, that their service ought to have guaranteed. Now, in this body, we often have hot air, debates, all the rest. Here's some practical advice. Last year, we saw veterans have a deadline to submit their intent to file, and many did. That was to get backdated benefits back to when this bill passed the Congress in 2021. Veterans and survivors who submitted that intent to file need to submit an actual claim as soon as possible if they have not yet done that. That's to ensure they get the most out of the PACT Act for those benefits that they have earned. They've got a year after submitting intent to file to submit their final claim forms to receive those backdated benefits. VA.gov.pact, that's the website to do it. To get more information, check the status of your claim. My office and the office, I'm sure, of every member here is willing to help a veteran. Go see a VSO, a Veteran Service Organization, an accredited claims agent, an attorney. You can find some help. And I'd remind my fellow veterans this: these are earned benefits. You've earned them through your service. Make sure that you're getting what you need to take care of yourself and your family. The PACT Act is a big deal, but it's only going to be successful if we fund it, if we make sure every veteran in this country knows what they have earned, and we give the VA the resources they need to meet veterans' demands. So that is our task in this body. I will work with everyone here to get it done. I'm proud of the work that remains for this Congress. The ranking member, I yield back. Mr. Speaker, thank you.
Thank you, Congressman DeLuzio. At this time, I yield to my friend from California who helped me champion Veterans Last Congress, an amazing doctor and an amazing neighbor of mine, Representative Raul Ruiz.
Thank you, Ranking Member Takano. The Honoring Our PACT Act is the most significant expansion of healthcare access and benefits for veterans in generations. Now, over 5 million veterans and family members will have the peace of mind that if they become ill due to their exposure to toxic burn pits, or they are disabled and cannot work, or God forbid they pass away, they will receive the benefits that they need to overcome an illness, the health care, to be able to stay at home with their family because they're unable to work. And if they pass, their families, they will have peace of mind that their family will get their benefits. Look, for many years, I've brought this issue up in committees, in the VA committee, and the general public, that veterans were dying of cancers. Veterans were unable to breathe due to pulmonary illnesses, all of which were due to the toxic air that they breathed from the smoke from burn pits. The initial excuses were the evidence does not point or show any correlation. And well, as a scientist, I refuted that. They asked the wrong questions and their methodologies were flawed. Then the other was that it was too expensive. Well, our values are to put the lives of our veterans first and foremost. We send them to war without consideration of the cost of war. So therefore, it is our moral obligation to take care of veterans. And I fought this tooth and nail under the banner of a name of Jennifer Kepner, a veteran who served in Balad Air Force Base in Iraq, who died of pancreatic cancer. But before she died, I met with her at home in her kitchen table, and she made me promise that no other veteran should suffer what she went through in trying to get the care and the benefits for her family. And so we accomplished and fulfilled that promise when we introduced the presumptive benefits for warfighters exposed to burn pits and other toxins, which was included in the Honoring Our PACT Act, which was the heart and soul of the Honoring Our PACT Act, because it gave presumptive benefits to 23 illnesses and categories of illnesses, which total over 300 illnesses, and that's continuing to grow. But the reason why we're here is because House Democrats continue to fight hard to ensure the implementation of the PACT Act. Last year, I spoke very frequently about a pending deadline for veterans to file an intent to file a claim for the PACT Act, which if they did so within a year after they filed that intent to file, they would get presumptive benefits and back pay to the day that the law was enacted. So now we're nearing the deadline of that intent to file, which means that veterans had a year to file their claim to get that back pay till the day that the law was signed. And if they haven't, then they should do so before August 14th or before the year of when they filed that intent. Now, if they do so, then they will get their pay and their benefits to the date of when the law was signed. If they don't, or if they miss that year after they filed that intent, they should not despair. It's not this is your last chance of getting the claims. The only difference will be that they will get their benefits backtracked to the date that they filed their claim from that point on. So it's very urgent that we inform our veterans that if they filed an intent to file, that they file the claim before the year of the date that they filed their intent to file. So that's why it's very important that veterans go to vapact.gov, the VA website, or call 1-800-827-1000. And call their members of Congress, work with their county veteran service organizations representative or any of the VSOs, or call and get the information that's needed so they don't miss out on the additional full benefits that the PACT Act gave our veterans. And with that, I want to thank everybody again who was involved. I want to thank President Biden and Secretary McDonough, who were the game changers during this long fight that we've been having that culminated in such a victory for our veterans. With that, I yield back.
Thank you, Representative Ruiz. And let me just add that Representative Ruiz, Dr. Representative Ruiz, was instrumental in the part of this PACT Act package that dealt with the 23 presumptive illnesses. Let's be clear that the 23 presumptive illnesses aren't just 23 diseases. They're actually buckets, 23 buckets. We're talking more like 300 illnesses that are covered by the PACT Act. And we endeavored hard to make sure that veterans did not have to wait decades for all of the hard scientific evidence to come in. That we relied on analogs such as the 9/11 attacks on the trade towers and the toxic substances that our first responders were subjected to. And that we observed that those first responders had a pattern of illnesses that began to arise in numbers that did not match what would be in the general population. And we could use such approaches to begin to identify those very similar kinds of diseases that were arising from exposure to toxic burn pits. So I want to now yield to my good friend from California, Representative Jim Costa, a longtime advocate for veterans.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to commend the hard work and the efforts and the passion that Representative Member Takano, the ranking member on the committee and previous chair, has given to this issue. The hard work finally has paid off, and we say thank you. For all too long, our nation has failed to honor its promise to all our veterans who are victims of toxic exposures. It's our sacred obligation, I believe, to take care of the troops we send in harm's way. That's the American way. And to take care of them and their families when they return home. Sadly, nearly 3.5 million veterans have been exposed to the contaminants such as burn pits, toxic fragments, radiation, and other hazardous materials during their deployment. Until mid-2010s or so, the burn pits were commonly used in Iraq and Afghanistan and other locations to dispose of waste collected at military bases. Well, we've discovered that the aftermath has resulted in drastic impacts to those veterans. Nearly 3.5 million deployed veterans are exposed to burn pits in the last 30 years. Think about that. 3.5 million veterans. 70% of the disability claims involving these toxic exposures were denied. They were denied by the Veterans Administration. That's just wrong, leaving many of them, including 750,000 Iraq and Afghanistan veterans, without any benefits. Disgraceful. House Democrats and President Biden fought like hell to change this, and we did. The PACT Act is the largest expansion, think about this, the largest expansion of benefits for service for toxic exposed veterans in over 30 years through the hard work of Representative Takano and other members on that committee, joining with our Democratic caucus. We've added over 23 presumptive conditions and our categories, as was noted before, for burn pits and Agent Orange, and expanded the VA health care to millions of veterans, including those who served in Vietnam, the Gulf War, and post-9/11 areas. 2 years later, we are beginning to see the results. It is long overdue. More than 5.6 million veterans have received screenings for toxic exposures, 5.6 million. Over 1 million veteran claims have been granted by the Veteran Administration, a 75% approval rate for PACT Act related claims. What a change. Nearly 24,000 veterans in my district alone, the 21st district in the San Joaquin Valley, are eligible for benefits, including 2,100 that have been processed claims, and a total of over $5.17 billion in retroactive awards for PACT Act-related benefits for veterans and their survivors. This is a sea change. It is a big deal. So I want to thank President Biden. I want to thank the Secretary McDonnell. I want to thank all of those members who have been involved in this. I'm proud to have been a co-sponsor and have voted for this historic law that has improved the lives of veterans in my district and nationwide and their families. For the family sacrifice as well, and we should never, ever forget that. So in closing, we must continue to build upon this success and to ensure that our veterans can retire with the dignity and the respect they deserve because what? They have earned it. They have earned it. So the bottom line is this. For those men and women who are currently serving our country, we say thank you, and we think of you every day. For the veterans and their families, and the families, as I said, sacrifice as well, a grateful nation can never, ever say thank you enough. I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you, Representative Costa. And I will now yield to my friend from California, a strong advocate for veterans, a Marine veteran himself, my good friend, Representative Salud Carbajal.
Thank you, Ranking Member Takano. Mr. Speaker, as a proud Marine veteran and the representative for more than 34,000 of my fellow veterans across California's 24th Congressional District, I am proud to see the real impact that the Honoring Our PACT Act has had for veterans and their families across the United States. 2 years ago, we came together with President Joe Biden to pass the largest and most significant expansion of veterans' benefits in more than 30 years. And since then, we have seen more than 1.5 million claims filed for toxic exposures and other health risks resulting from service in Vietnam, the Gulf War, and wars of the post-9/11 era. More than 2,000 of those claims have come from veterans in my own region. We cannot give up the momentum on this important bill. While we have seen so many already utilizing these expanded benefits, current estimates suggest that more than 5 million veterans were exposed to some amount of toxic substances during their military service. That is why I'm encouraging all veterans who submitted an intent to file last summer to make sure they are following through and submitting an actual claim as soon as possible to ensure that our veterans can get backdated benefits to the date that this bill was signed into law. Thank you, Ranking Member Takano and House Democratic leadership for helping uplift this important deadline and reminding the American people and our veteran communities that we are still here every week fighting for their health, safety, and prosperity, all of which were earned by their years and decades of service. I yield back.
Thank you, Representative Carbajal. I have the urge to say hoorah. Thank you for your service to our country, not only as a representative, but also as a Marine veteran. I now would like to yield to my good friend from the state of Rhode Island, Representative Seth Magaziner.
Thank you to the ranking member. Our debt to the heroic men and valiant women in the service of our country can never be repaid. They have earned our undying gratitude. These words spoken by President Harry Truman still ring true to this day. Millions of service members and veterans have answered the call to serve and protect the freedoms that we hold dear. And just as our nation's service members make a promise to leave no one behind on the battlefield, we must leave no veteran behind when they come home. The PACT Act honors this promise. It is the largest expansion of VA benefits in a generation and ensures that millions of veterans who have been exposed to Agent Orange, burn pits, and other toxins during their military service receive the care that they have earned and deserve. The PACT Act is one of the greatest accomplishments of the Biden-Harris administration, made possible by the leadership of then-Speaker Nancy Pelosi, Chairman Mark Takano, among many others. In Rhode Island, more than 2,300 veterans have already received PACT Act benefits, with another 4,000 projected to be added to the program in the coming years. And over 1 million veterans and their families have received PACT Act benefits nationally. I've been working very closely with my Rhode Island 2nd Congressional District Military and Veterans Advisory Committee to spread the word about the PACT Act and how veterans in our district can access those benefits. However, there is still more work to be done. All too often, benefits claim sharks exploit veterans and their families with exorbitant fees. We must do more to protect veterans and their families from these predatory practices. And we must also ensure that veterans and their family members who are exposed to toxic PFAS chemicals on military bases and elsewhere receive the health care that they need, and I've co-sponsored legislation to make that a reality. We must always fight to ensure that veterans receive the care and benefits they deserve, because they deserve nothing but the very best. Thank you, and I yield back to the ranking member.
Thank you, Representative Magaziner. I will now yield to my good friend from North Carolina, a great champion of veterans, Representative Deborah Ross.
Thank you so much. I rise today to celebrate the historic PACT Act. Thanks to this critical legislation, we're closer today than ever to ensuring every single veteran has access to the exceptional care and benefits they deserve. In less than 2 years, I'm happy to report, as my colleagues have also reported, that 1 million PACT Act claims have been granted to more than 800,000 veterans and survivors across the country. As the proud daughter of an Air Force veteran and a doctor, it's especially meaningful to recognize this milestone today. We make a sacred promise to all of our nation's veterans that after bravely serving our country in uniform, we will care for you when you return home. That's why we can and must do more to ensure that no veteran faces financial or logistical barriers to accessing the medical treatment and benefits they are owed. Crucially, the PACT Act included the Camp Lejeune Justice Act, our bipartisan bill to enable service members from Camp Lejeune who are exposed to toxic chemicals to pursue long overdue justice in court. This legislation, unfortunately, did not go quite far enough, and too many veterans continue to face unacceptable barriers to accessing the remedies. I recently introduced, with Congressman Greg Murphy, also a doctor, the bipartisan Camp Lejeune Justice Corrections Act to make additional reforms, including capping attorneys' fees, expanding jurisdiction to alleviate the large backlog of cases our courts are facing, and clarifying the right to a jury trial. Today and every day, let's continue the fight to support our courageous veterans, service members, and their families. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield back.
I want to thank the gentlelady from North Carolina for her work on the section of the PACT Act that relates to justice for those service members who were in residence at Camp Lejeune. It's a decades-long effort to bring justice for those members, and I urge our government to move as expeditiously as possible to get those claims settled with all of our veterans across the country who served at Camp Lejeune. I now would like to welcome and yield to my friend from Ohio, a member of the Veterans Affairs Committee, a fierce advocate for veterans, Representative Greg Landsman.
Well, thank you, Ranking Member Takano, for hosting tonight and your leadership on the PACT Act, which has helped so many veterans. Our veterans and service members have sacrificed so much on behalf of all of us. And we know now that during their service, millions were exposed to toxic substances, and these exposures have caused serious health issues for so many. That's why 2 years ago, you and others passed the PACT Act. This landmark legislation expanded health care for veterans exposed to these toxic substances. Since its passage, over 32,000 Ohioans and over 1 million veterans nationwide have had their PACT Act claims granted by the VA. This means that these folks are finally getting the health care they deserve. As a member of the House Committee for Veterans Affairs, I'm proud to serve our veterans and advocate for better benefits, more funding, and continued investment in their well-being. In our district, we have over 30,000 veterans. Ensuring the continued acceptance of PACT Act claims, funding the VA properly, and passing important veteran legislation like our Employing Veterans Feed America bill, which provides jobs for veterans, we are doing important work. I am grateful for all the veterans in Southwest Ohio and across the country, and I promise to keep working to improve their lives and the lives of their loved ones. Thank you, and I yield back.
Thank you, Congressman Landsman, for your amazing advocacy for our nation's veterans. I will now yield to my good friend from the state of Mexico, the land of enchantment, Representative Melanie Stansbury.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I rise today to celebrate and to honor our veterans and to celebrate and highlight the extraordinary passage of the PACT Act, which is the single most significant expansion of veterans' benefits in generations, and a bill that we passed here in Congress under Democratic leadership with the support of President Joe Biden just 2 years ago. It expands VA benefits to over 3 million veterans across the United States. In New Mexico, we have a long and a proud tradition of service that extends across all of our communities, from the Navajo Code Talkers and the heroes of Bataan to the veterans of Iraq and Afghanistan. The courage and valor and dedication of our veterans is woven into the very fabric of who we are as New Mexicans. In fact, over 133,000 New Mexicans have served this great nation, including my own veteran at home and my partner who served this country in the United States Marine Corps. To all of our veterans and active duty military, we say thank you every day for your service and for your sacrifice. And we are here because of the sacrifices you have made to defend this country and our democracy. But we must also thank those veterans who fought to pass the PACT Act itself, including, among them, New Mexico's own Master Sergeant Jesse Baca of the New Mexico Air Guard and his wife, Maria, who fought for over a decade for our veterans exposed to burn pits and who stood on the steps of this Capitol outside of this building to help get the PACT Act passed. So now it is up to us as leaders across the country to ensure that our veterans and our families are cared for. And we know that when we care for our veterans, we care for New Mexicans. Voting for the PACT Act was one of the proudest moments of my service to this country here in Congress. And today, one of my greatest and most awesome and humbling duties is to ensure that every New Mexican veteran accesses the benefits of the PACT Act. And so I say to those who have not yet signed up, who have served this country over the course of their service, were exposed to burn pits and toxins and other workplace hazards, there is still time. The VA is there for you. They have your back, and so do we. So I want to say to all of our veterans, you have served this great country. You have put everything on the line. And now it's our turn for the PACT Act to serve you. And with that, I say, thank you for your service and your sacrifice, and I yield back.
Thank you so much, Congresswoman Stansbury. Now I yield to another great friend from the great state of North Carolina, an amazing advocate for veterans, and someone who has been a fierce advocate for justice for our Camp Lejeune veterans, the amazing Representative Kathy Manning.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for all your hard work and your friendship. Mr. Speaker, for far too long, millions of veterans exposed to toxins like burn pits and contaminated water did not receive the care and the benefits they earned. That's why in the last Congress, House Democrats took action to correct this injustice. I was proud to help pass the PACT Act, historic legislation to deliver long overdue benefits and health care to 3.5 million veterans exposed to toxins while serving our country. The PACT Act expanded eligibility for health care at the VA, including expanded coverage for illnesses related to Agent Orange. For veterans, families who lost their loved ones, the law may provide monthly stipends and access to life insurance, among other benefits. Now, 2 years after President Biden signed the PACT Act into law, it is helping veterans and their families across the country. The VA has received over 1.4 million PACT Act claims, including over 4,700 claims from veterans in my home district, North Carolina's 6th District. Our country has an obligation to care for those who bravely serve our nation. And with the PACT Act, Democrats and the Biden administration are delivering on that promise. I was proud to help pass this deeply important legislation and support the thousands of veterans in my district who are now able to get the care they need. I will always work to honor the sacrifices Americans' veterans have made and to ensure they are treated with the respect and the dignity they deserve. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I yield back.
Thank you, Representative Manning. And now I wish to yield to my good friend from the state of Minnesota, another great champion of veterans, and someone who herself has a veterans medical center in her district, Representative Ilhan Omar.
Which I hope you'll come visit, Chairman.
I intend to do so.
Soon. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. 2 years ago, we passed the PACT Act, one of the most consequential pieces of legislation to address the severe health problems that so many of our veterans are facing who served our great country. I want to thank my colleague, Congressman Mark Takano, for his leadership in getting this bill across the finish line. This bill has made it easier for veterans and their families to get the relief and the care they deserve. I've heard from so many Minnesotans on how life-changing this legislation has been. From Brian, who lost his wife to pancreatic cancer, to Andrew, who lost his brother to leukemia, and Amanda, whose husband, Raphael, was diagnosed with stage 4 colon cancer and is now getting the treatment he deserves because of the PACT Act. All of the family members and veterans I have met with know this bill could have been a game changer for them, their loved ones, or just how crucial it is to help the next veteran. Whether it was Agent Orange in Vietnam or exposure to toxic waters at Camp Lejeune or burn pits and other toxin exposures in Iraq and Afghanistan, this is a part of our military's history and legacy. I am glad we are finally addressing it in the most comprehensive way it deserves. While I'm grateful this program has been enacted to provide veterans and their loved ones with the care and benefits they have earned and deserve, only a small percentage of Minnesotans are taking advantage of this program. Less than 10,000 veterans out of more than 100,000 veterans in Minnesota who qualify under this program have enrolled. It is crucial that we continue to get the word out about this life-saving program. To see if you or someone you know qualifies, please go to va.gov/PACT PACT. That's va.gov/PACT. I will not stop fighting until every one of my constituent who's eligible receives the care they deserve. And I will keep advocating for crucial reforms to stop future servicemen and women from experiencing the same hardship. Because when we ask young people to serve our country in uniform, we should not also be asking them to expose their bodies to toxins, to live with the consequences of those toxins for the rest of their lives. Thank you, and I yield back.
Thank you, Representative Ilhan, and thank you for all your amazing work to help the veterans in your district and across our country. At this time, I'd like to yield to my friend from New York and the newest member of the House Veterans Affairs Committee, Representative Tim Kennedy.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to honor the veterans that have made great personal sacrifices to serve our country. To all those that have donned the military uniform, on behalf of a grateful nation, I say thank you. First, I would like to express my gratitude to Assistant Leader Joe Neguse and Ranking Member Mark Takano for holding this special order to honor our veterans. From burn pits in Iraq and Afghanistan to Agent Orange in Vietnam, veterans exposed to toxic substances face challenges that impact their quality of life and long-term health. We owe it to our veterans who have defended democracy and preserved our precious freedoms to deliver the benefits that they have earned and deserve. That's why Democrats passed and President Biden signed into law the PACT Act, which represents the largest expansion of benefits and services for veterans exposed by toxins during their time in service in over 30 years. To date, over 1 million PACT Act claims have been approved. People are receiving the care and benefits that they need and deserve. As an added success, the law has led to an increase in veterans accessing medical services from VA hospitals, crucially including a generation of Vietnam veterans. Additionally, the widows of veterans will receive compensation because of this law, fulfilling the nation's duty of care to the families of veterans. The PACT Act is making a difference for veterans in New York and across the country, accessing the benefits that they need to lead healthy lives. Again, to our veterans, our nation is forever indebted to you for your noble service. God bless you all. I yield back.
Thank you, Representative Kennedy, and thank you for hitting the ground running as one of our newest representatives, and I know you're going to be getting the message out to the veterans that live in your district to make sure that they submit their claims, their PACT Act claims, and to access the benefits that they have earned through their service. You know, when President Biden signed the Honoring Our PACT Act, he declared that every eligible veteran should be able to apply immediately. We had written the law in such a way that the health care and benefits would be phased in. But President Biden decided that every veteran should be able to apply for benefits as soon as it became law. Within 24 hours, the Department of Veterans Affairs had created a website where veterans and their families could learn more about the law and how to apply for benefits. This shows how committed President Biden has been with House Democrats' support to the veteran community. He understood what a difference this important law would make for veterans, and he did not want them to wait to be able to apply. The successful implementation of the PACT Act shows that the Biden administration was invested in helping veterans and implemented this law far faster than most laws. We all know, and we all knew veterans and their families could not wait any longer. This was many years coming for veterans who were already facing illness or cancer from toxic exposure. And many of these veterans were able to get updated disability ratings and access to health care. I just want to add that while the PACT Act is sometimes known as the burn pits bill. When we talk about veterans waiting for decades, the PACT Act actually addressed Agent Orange claims, Agent Orange claims and exposure to Agent Orange that had not been covered by previous legislation. So this took care of unfinished business with Agent Orange and exposure to radiation. And so those veterans that were from previous conflicts previous to Afghanistan and Iraq, were also eligible to get their toxic exposure illnesses addressed and covered by this legislation. In fact, this legislation covers veterans who were involved in the global war on terror around the world. It was not just confined to those veterans that served in Iraq and Afghanistan. Before the PACT Act, veterans were likely to need to prove exposure to specific chemicals in order to receive health care and benefits. This is nearly impossible when talking about burn pits because of the myriad materials that were burned in them. Over 6 million veterans and their survivors have completed a toxic exposure screening to ensure that they're eligible for care and benefits now or in the future. VA also announced recently that over 1 million veterans had been granted their disability benefits, which is tremendous news less than 2 years since this bill became law. I would be remiss if I did not mention the veteran service organizations who all came together to support this bill and will it into law. They showed Congress and President Biden just how important it was that we took care of veterans and their survivors. Democrats and President Biden have proven time and time again that we do not just say thank you for your service. Our actions show just how grateful we are for that service and that they were willing to pay for all the costs of war. So I want to thank Assistant Leader Neguse and all of my colleagues who have joined me on the floor today for this special order hour on the Honoring Our PACT Act. I am proud to have authored this important legislation that has helped thousands of veterans. Thank you to Speaker Emerita Pelosi, who understood that we needed to deliver for veterans in the 117th Congress and who was a key player in getting this legislation over the finish line. I want to thank President Biden for his continued support of the veteran community. I don't know of a president who has a love or any greater love for veterans than President Biden. It is who he is. And so it is with great sincerity and great emotion that I thank him for his decades of service to our veterans. As I said much earlier, he decided that all eligible veterans would be immediately able to apply for benefits instead of the original phased-in approach. He knew how critical this would be for countless veterans and their families. We put partisanship aside and came together to help veterans and their families. More than 1 million veterans and their survivors have already received their benefits, and thousands more veterans have signed up for VA health care. However, as I said earlier, there are some 300,000 veterans who have submitted an intent to file at some point last year, who have 365 days to submit their claim. For most of these veterans, this 365-day window is this month or early August. In order to receive backdated benefits back to 2022, these veterans need to submit their claim as soon as possible. But we're not going to stop here. And while we celebrate the Honoring Our PACT Act and the more than 1 million veterans who have benefited from it, we know there's more work to do. As ranking member of the House Committee on Veterans Affairs, I am working to end veteran homelessness, make VA an even more welcoming place for women and LGBTQ+ veterans, and stop attempts at more privatization of VA health care. We made a solemn promise to our service members that if we serve our country, we will take care of them. If they serve our country, we will take care of them. This means every veteran. Every veteran. And we also ensure and will ensure that they get the best possible care at VA facilities. We honored our pact with them. We honored the promise that we made to them with my legislation. But I will not stop working to improve the lives and livelihoods of veterans around the country. And now I'd like to yield for as much time as he may consume and to have the last word for tonight's special order hour, the Assistant Leader, Joe Neguse.
Well, I thank the ranking member again for his leadership, his clarity of conviction, and the steadfast commitment that he has shown to our nation's veterans time and time again. I certainly could not say it any better than he has, as you have heard, Mr. Speaker, from a wide cross-section of the House Democratic Caucus, members representing every community in our great country. Our commitment to our nation's veterans is rock solid. It is evidenced by the work that Ranking Member Takano and House Democrats, in partnership with President Biden, were able to ultimately accomplish in the last Congress. As you can see, 1 million claims under the PACT Act. Real families, real stories, real impacts for countless veterans who have made incredible sacrifices for our country. We are indebted to them, and we will continue our commitment to them in the weeks and the months and the years ahead, led by Ranking Member Takano and by the leadership of the members whom you've heard from this evening. I thank the Ranking Member, and I thank the Speaker. I yield the floor.